No, what were some of the things about World War I that made it particularly heinous compared to other wars? Trench warfare, good. What else? They used gas. They used the mustard gas. For the first time, they used what type of gun? Machine guns, right. So, think about 100 years ago. What opportunities did young men have for getting off the family farm or ascending out of poverty? None. So if you were a young man and you were given this idea that war was heroic and, that you were going to be a hero and that it was sweet and decorous to go to war and it was the most manly thing you could do, would that be appealing to a lot of young men? Is it still appealing to a lot of young men? Yes. So this poem is sort of a contradiction to the idea that propaganda put out. And then also, now we're privy to a lot of privileges outside of our house and our country and, into areas that we wouldn't be able to see. However, 100 years ago, what would people back at home not be able to view? The realities of war. So a lot of World War I poetry was actually written to expose the realities of war, and thematically it all kind of had the same tune, that war was not sweet and decorous. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible environment for so many young men. Also, now you have to provide documentation and get fingerprinted, and you have to be 18 years old to join the military, but was all of that sort of adhered to 100 years ago? No, they had kids as young as 12 and 13 enlisting and fighting in World War I, in both Britain, which is where this is written from, and in America. So, this poem is written to expose the realities of war, and it's also sort of a message to the government that put out the propaganda. If you look at the end of the poem, you have the title repeated, but then you also have an additional line. It is sweet and decorous to die for one's country, but at the end of the poem, it's prefaced by what phrase? The old lie. And why is lie capitalized? When you have a word capitalized in a poem, it typically personifies it and puts extra emphasis on it. So how old is this particular statement pertaining to war? As far back as time, you watch Braveheart, it goes as far back as time goes. This was messaged to people. So I'm going to read the poem, and then you'll have to line it again because I didn't. And I'm going to put some categories up on the board that I'd like you to look for some information about. And if you want to make yourself a list of the categories and write down line numbers, that's fine. If you want to annotate the poem itself in order to look at how it fulfills the categories, that's fine too. It has a very clear theme. One of them is that, not that it is sweet and decorous to die for one's country, but that it is, what would we put here instead? It is terrible. Yes, it is not sweet and decorous to die for one's country. And then also, in the poem, we have him referencing the fact that he's haunted in his dreams by what he saw in war. And that would be, what else? What other sort of common theme about war experiences would that pertain to?
PTSD.
PTSD, right. Back then it wasn't identified as PTSD, it was called what? Shell shock, right. So there's also the reference to that, which is again kind of an age-old theme. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots but limped on bloodshot. All went lame, all blind. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling. Fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. And in some smothering dreams, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile and curable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Dulce decorum est per patria mori. So again, this one is a lot less abstract than the last one, and it works very well as an introductory sort of poem to analyze because it fulfills so many of the categories very well. So, flipping back to my category list, you may want to also have your page available to you with the explanation of the particular elements as you go through and look to see how the poem fulfills them. And I'll break them up here too. After I do. want to do is kind of go through each category and look at how all very specific category contributes to our understanding and the emphasis of the themes. For example, the title. The fact that the poem is in Latin is significant for what reason? What type of language is Latin? It's a dead language. And what does war create? Death. Right. Also, this is cool. I looked this up one time. Dead doesn't mean not spoken. It means that it doesn't evolve. Like all languages evolve, like our dictionary constantly evolves. A dead language is simply one that's finite and it has discontinued to evolve, not that it's not used. Also, what type of ceremony and ritual is Latin used in? Church, right? Particularly what type of church? Catholic, right? And what type of ritual is Latin used heavily in marriage, but then also in what? Funerals. So there's a very somber tone to Latin as well. Okay? And then, the type of poem. It's free verse, but it's very, very highly regulated in its rhyme scheme. So there we would have ambiguity created between the rhyme scheme and the content of the poem. The poem is very controlled in its rhyme scheme and in its stanza length. However, it's about what type of circumstances. Were they highly controlled circumstances? No. The speaker, why is he trustworthy as a speaker? The tone, he has tones both towards the subject matter of his poem, as in like the death of the man into his recurring dreams, but also his tone towards the government that created the propaganda. So just look at how each category would be fulfilled in emphasizing the themes that we discussed. And if you want to make yourself like a little template, if you want to write on the poem, that's fine too. And again, if you want to start off without analytical stuff, look for assonance, alliteration, and consonants, and figures of speech, because we should be, pretty good with those by